Consortium's webinar entitled Regional Integrated Systems and Planning, Taking Public-Private Partnerships to the Next Level in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast Regions. I'd like to thank Sprint for sponsoring today's presentation. At this time, I'd like to take a minute to talk about what's going to happen over the next hour. First, we'll have a welcome from our Executive Director, Tom Moran. We'll have a few minutes from our Board President, Joe Picciano. We'll review All Hazards Consortium's Regional UASI workshop results, which will be done by Dennis Schrader, who was a moderator at that workshop 2 months ago. And then finally, we'll have a presentation by Richard Zinitino. We'll save about 10-15 minutes at the end of the webinar for the Q&A session. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tom Moran, the Executive Director of the All Hazards Consortium. Tom?
Hi, Laura. Thank you, and we want to welcome everyone on the call. This is a series of ongoing webinars the consortium states are producing to help educate folks virtually to some of the new initiatives and projects going on within the region. This program is aimed at not just educating folks within this region, but around the country as well, those who might be interested in similar public-private efforts. Back in January, the states of the All Hazards Consortium initiated a new program called the Regional Integrated Systems and Planning Initiative. The big idea was to begin to coordinate planning efforts and investments, as well as begin to integrate systems on specific regional projects. The three areas that the states are looking at are catastrophic planning, critical infrastructure protection, information sharing, along with fusion centers. Additionally, they wanted to add the business continuity perspective from the private sector. This is a very important new initiative going on within the region, and the big idea here is to pick specific projects and begin to integrate the owner-operators from the private sector along with the state and local governments. In addition to that, the federal government, DoD, research institutes, and nonprofits. This wonderful new initiative has created a lot of energy and excitement. This webinar is part of an event that was the kickoff for this. As we look at this slide, this indicates how we look to accomplish this over time. If you look at from moving from left to right, you have separate systems, separate planning efforts, and so forth that over time begin to connect. And we've started to do that already within the All Hazards Consortium states. Those connections can be meetings, they can be systems, they can be a number of different things that bring people together. When you start to integrate, however, now you're really accomplishing some things that are significant, and you're also creating some new issues that have to be resolved. And the long term is to begin to fuse these processes and systems and procedures. That is going to be a ways off, a couple years at least, but we're looking now to go from connected to integrated. Down at the bottom, you'll see that separate organizations are easy to govern. When you begin to move to the right, governance increases in difficulty, and you have to pay more attention to the governance structure and the models when you get to a multi-state or a multi-state private sector organization. Interoperability begins to increase as you move left to right. This is very important as it reduces costs. Costs are typically higher when they move to the right. They become lower over time because you're leveraging existing investments, existing people and time. And of course the impact here as you move to the right has more of a regional national impact. This workshop provided a first run for the states to work on this together with private sector owner-operators. As I mentioned, we had in March 21-22, we had our first Urban Area Security Initiative workshop. It was focused on coordinating planning and projects. This was really representative of our first integrated planning meetings within the consortium, but some of the states have been doing this for some time. The major workshop themes focused on integrating systems and planning efforts. As a result, building partnerships and trust, developing some key projects and identifying those, tracking those, having a dialogue amongst its members instead of a lecture. This is very important, to be a team of equals, coordinating these planning efforts both in the public and private sector, and looking for sustainment models to support these efforts as time goes by. I'd like to introduce Mr. Joe Picciano. Joe is our newly elected board president from New Jersey. He was started in January. Joe has been one of the key people involved in this new initiative. As a result, we're going to be looking to do, over the next 12 to 18 months, putting this initiative together under Joe's leadership along with the rest of the states here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Joe Picciano. Joe?
I'm just going to real quickly re-support what was just said and talk about common goals. What we recognize recognize real quickly after doing this now for a couple of years that we really hadn't been engaging at the level we should have been with the key organizations, the key owner-operators, that piece of the private sector and the critical sectors in this country that sort of makes what we do, connects all the dots, and drives everything in emergency management and homeland security. So with that common ground and those common goals, protecting our citizens versus your employees in the private sector, our property, your facilities, the economy, your business, critical infrastructure, and what you provide in the way of critical infrastructure, we wanted to come up with a system that built on opportunity. You can move to the next slide. And basically, our new way of thinking is, as the All-Hazard Consortium exists, we should be identifying in those areas Tom mentioned before, those critical 3 or 4 areas, those opportunities for the sectors, i.e. private sector, critical sectors, those opportunities where they can engage states, local jurisdictions, our urban area security initiative communities in building systems that not only protect public entities but private entities. And as Dennis mentioned, Delaware Valley Information Center, Intelligence Center rather, the DVIC, that is a critical public effort, but it's a better effort if it includes the private sector, the critical sector. It includes those owners and operators who are concerned about security, that they're part of that system. We want to build those opportunities, showcase those opportunities, and allow ultimately for integration. Same thing about the food industry. The All-Hazards Consortium is in a position now to invest in expanding a food distribution plan with the National Food Council that we've developed in New Jersey with other states. We're going to take an initiative, lay out the opportunities, if the industry is interested in working with us. Another example would be ports. There's a lot of efforts, particularly at the state and local level, with funding security systems, information sharing systems. How do we build on that? Where do we provide those opportunities for the private sector to engage? Next slide. Once we build that, once we understand needs, requirements, and priorities, we can begin then to build the systems that will allow that to work. And I think this new organization, the All-Hazards Consortium as it stands now, will be in a better position of doing that if we are able to identify opportunities and, more importantly, target very specific things that can be done that are win-win for both the private sector and public sector. Next slide. And this basically generates what we call shared trust partnership. Absolutely will be necessary for success. There's got to be something in it for each of us to be successful. We've done the presentations, we've talked a really good game. Now we need to identify, and I'm going to say the word, those projects and those opportunities that really mean something in the end, that will provide solutions to problems or provide enhanced security or further opportunities to engage at a deeper level. Next slide. And essentially we want to do this through the steps to success, and that's integrate public and private efforts, extend the fence, and this is important. We understand that inside the fence, that's your property, that's private sector's workings, and it's how you do your business. Where we want to work with you is outside the fence as public entity. What can we do in a way of security, distribution, understanding where we should make investments that ensure your businesses will be back online quicker, allowing our economy to in the moving forward mode as soon as possible. And if we can do that by integrating systems, we should be doing it. Again, going back to opportunity. And the first step listed as a step to success, but it's really joint planning. How are we going to get there? How are we going to have these projects identified? How are we going to work together to ensure that they're integrated? Next slide. Essentially, we need each other, and I think that's our new model, recognizing the importance of working together. Thank you, Tom.
I wanted to thank Tom and Joe for the opportunity to share the results of this is a very exciting evolution that the consortium has taken on, and delighted to help. Since leaving government 2.5 years ago, I've been doing private consulting and agreed to chair the Regional Executive Advisory Group. REAG has been a way of providing access to many former officials have been turning over since 2001 in the state's and local jurisdiction. And Tom relies on us, a pool of leaders who are called upon to share expertise in the region. In the case of the UNC workshop, I was pleased to have the opportunity to moderate several of the sessions on the second day that included face-to-face discussions with private owner-operators. The facilitated discussions were designed to draw out as much of the private sector perspective as possible. And I found through these conversations and others is that oftentimes the owner-operators may not appreciate their role in disaster preparedness because they've not been asked before in a way that spoke to their language and priorities. And if we look at the new FEMA strategy that focuses on the whole community, it requires finding ways to involve private owner-operators. So in that regard, the consortium could be considered an enabler of this strategy by focusing on private sector operators and R&D teams rather than strictly focusing on the vendor sales force. Now, having said that, there's a very key role for the vendor sales force by bringing their commercial customers together with government players to integrated planning. So this was the first workshop that was designed to begin to integrate the private owner-operators into the planning and systems design process. For this particular private sector panelists included Mike Ambrosia from Wakeford Foods, Rick Zeno from Sprint, who we're going to hear from in a minute, and Greg Ferris from Morgan Stanley. And they exchanged ideas with like Ira Tannenbaum from New York City, Scott DiGirolamo from Morris County, New Jersey. We had Maureen Cardinale from New Jersey DOT, Mike McAllister from Virginia. We also had Joe Licciardelli and Walt Smith from the Delaware Valley Information Center, John Contestable from APL. So it was a great opportunity to share perspectives and get into the nitty-gritty of some of the projects. Some of the key recommendations that came out of that were that you need to engage the private sector in all phases of planning, and that the public sector should communicate its needs, but not necessarily the solutions, and allow the private sector to provide its perspective on what the solutions might be. There was also a sense that we need to focus on resilience, recovery, and a very strong perspective from the private sector owner-operators was that rather than trying to engage every single company, that we